we talked about two types of data mainly. They're structured and unstructured. We haven't really seen any data sets until now. Today's lecture is really to help you understand the different types of data sets that you can, use for your own projects, but also to identify good versus bad data sets. There is a thing such as bad data sets, and we're going to talk about which data sets you should avoid. The first link here is from this website called Kaggle.com. So this is a really useful site for data scientists to, first of all, look at data sets, but also if you're more proficient in data science, you can join competitions. So they have data science competitions. This is a very community-oriented website. It's not the case that there's one source that uploads things every day. People from all over the world are uploading and discussing things. Specifically, we're going to look at their datasets feature. So they have many datasets that you can explore and then also download for free. You can see things like when they were last updated. Sometimes they also share what are the terms for usage. For educational purposes, you're allowed to use most data sets as long as it's not for commercial gain. One of the data sets we're going to look at right now is the average SAT scores for public schools in New York City. If I go to data sets and I start searching here in the search bar, SAT scores New York City, and then I filter the results with dataset here by clicking on this dataset tile. Here is the dataset, average SAT scores for NYC public schools. Right off the bat, you can see that this was updated 8 years ago. So here's one key characteristic you should know, right? How long ago was the dataset updated? If it's very old, the data is also probably very old. In this case, SAT scores probably change every year. More recently, I think a lot of students are not even taking SATs, right? Because colleges are making it optional. So this data set probably doesn't even capture things like that because it was updated 8 years ago. Try to find data sets that are recent. Maybe 2 years ago is fine. This is not like a hard metric that you need to look at, right? Because it depends on the topic. In this case, it's SAT scores, which are taken yearly. So they have this usability score. Here you can see it's 8. If I hover over it, you can see, Kaggle gives dataset scores for different categories. For example, credibility. For some reason, Kaggle didn't think that this data set is credible. And credibility really comes from where is the source of the data coming from. In general, I would say the more data you have, the better. Focusing in on the author, right? And looking back at that credibility score that Kaggle gave it. If we look at the metadata for this data set, there's no name for the author. A lot of this, required metadata are empty. If I look at provenance, so provenance means what is the source of the data? You usually want data sets with high data provenance, meaning you can easily trace actual data back to credible source. The value is empty here. So we don't really get an idea of where this data is coming from. But don't go off of this Kaggle score right off the bat, because if you actually read this about section, it says the data was compiled and published by the New York City Department of Education. So they do tell you where the data set is coming from. Do they give you any more information? Testing rates were provided by the College Board. So the College Board is the organization that produces the SATs, right? If you do choose data sets, you want to be able to talk about, is the data set that I chose credible? Where is the actual source of the data, right? If there's no source, then try to dig into deeper and try to understand if the author mentioned something in the about section. There are, many other sources to look for data sets. Kaggle is something we just saw right now. There's a very nice website called data.gov. If anyone is interested in exploring research questions around government, politics, or public interest projects, right? This is probably the best source. There's thousands of data sets that come from official sources. Let's look at a specific data set from data.gov. This one is for green books. Maybe you heard the news recently that this government agency, USAID, is shutting down. I think it happened just yesterday or this week. But there's a data set for how much money USA gives foreign countries in the form of loans or grants. You have a date of when it was updated. I would say when looking at government sources, you'll probably not find the most up-to-date data, but you can probably be sure that more credible than coming from a community platform like Kaggle. So this is another source. If you scroll down and look at, again, the metadata section, you have the publisher, which is USAID, the agency. Look at the metadata section for any data set that you look at. It's going to give you useful information to identify if this is a credible data set or not. The publisher is a government agency in this case. You can tell that from the .gov. So this is quite credible. If we were to go to the website, usa.com, and try to see if this data set exists there, the website is now shut down. So that's interesting, right? Sometimes you find broken links. I'm going to switch back to Kaggle again, but we're going to look at a topic in agriculture. Over here on the top right, you see a download button. Once you make an account, you can just click this download button and then download dataset as zip file. So now I have a CSV file downloaded. By the way, I'm finding these just by searching in the search bar. If you're interested in something like sports, football, for example, just search football in the search bar and make sure to select the data sets. And now all of these are football data sets, football player statistics 8 months ago. I just click on it and then I can explore it very easily here. There's 64 columns. If I want to see all of them, I'll just select all. We have things like people's age. We have things like the team, the height and weight. I mean, this seems like a great data set because it's all numbers. You can easily do a lot of statistical analysis with it. Here's another data set on Kaggle. It relates to New York City. In the About section, we see that it came from NYC Open Data. So, this data set is not given a good usability score by Kaggle. But if I actually go to NYC Open Data, right, this is also a very good source. Can I find this NYPD arrest data on NYC Open Data? Let's just search it and see. The first search is probably what Kaggle also has. How can we check? So if we look at the columns, we have things like the race, the gender, right? The age group of the perpetrator. If we look at Kaggle, we have similar things. The gender, the race, the age group, X coordinate and Y coordinate. This is probably where the crime was reported. Use Kaggle as a way to search for data sets, but then if you can actually find the original source, download it from the original source. If you want to look at movies and TV shows, you can search by a specific tag. There's 6,000 data sets on movies and TV shows. So your work really is to figure out what topic are you interested in. You will most likely find a data set for it. So now we have another source. There's so much data on COVID now. And I would say the data set from the World Health Organization is probably, there's another one from Google, but I think those two are probably the ones, if you're interested in finding data sets on COVID, you should probably look at those two sources. So here we're given some visualizations right off the bat of what the data contains, and it's presented in a very nice and user-friendly way. You can see trends very easily. Basically, it looks very pretty. If you want to download it, you press more and then you press data. And then you can download the specific data you want. For example, vaccination data. It just downloaded CSV file for me. There's another source apart from Kaggle, data.gov, NYC Open Data, the WHO. There's something called GitHub. So GitHub is a place where people share code. Here is a data set for makeup shades. And this is coming from unconventional source. This is just, some person, some engineer, data visualization engineer at USA Facts. And they personally just uploaded this data set. Here they talk about their methods, the source, when it was last modified, all the important things that you actually need to know. The columns. This is very important. In all the data sets that I talked about, the first thing I usually do is look at the columns to see if any columns that I can actually use to answer my research questions. We see their data types. We have integers, strings, floats, booleans, lists, etc. Right? So here text is basically a string. Number is probably an integer or a float. So this, is a data set for makeup shades. Here you can actually see the CSV file and you can download it by pressing download raw file. So even for GitHub, you need an account. So if you're going to find datasets on GitHub, you need to create an account. All right, the last source is really what I just talked about earlier, you can do a dataset search on Google. They have a specific link for it. So I just searched animals, free. Let's try to only find datasets that are free. Here we have a link to a Kaggle dataset. So there's some other ones. Animal shelter. If I go to this website, again, this one leads back to data.gov. So, the Google one is also really good because it's going to search data.gov, it's going to search Kaggle. And to be honest, those are probably the only two you need because there's enough data in both of those.